campus, and I'm very happy to be introducing Sophie, who's be our featured speaker. I'll give a little bit of background, I'll let her take it from there. A couple of things I wanted to make sure we highlight, and they were highlighted in the flyers that went out for this, is that Sophie is currently studying with Gaia University International. And so her focus of study, Andy, come on, you're late, sorry. Her focus of study is integrative eco-social design with a focus on permaculture. And prior to that, she'd done some studying at Yes Tomorrow Design Build School in Vermont. And I don't know, half a dozen different permaculture courses, advanced permaculture courses in the US, abroad, all
mostly
kinds
with
of places.
you, so.
Some with me here in New Hampshire and in Haiti. And so we're really excited. She's been doing lots of actual applied permaculture work on her farm in Andover, and now at the municipal level, also in Andover. So she's multifaceted, has a lot to offer. I'm trying to build you up a lot. And we're really excited to be able to feature you as a speaker here at Plymouth State University. So thanks to Office of Environmental Sustainability for making it happen. All right, so.
Great, so yeah, I'm Sophie. I did a sustainable design and build certificate at Yes Tomorrow last spring, and that sort of, it's kind of a whimsical decision, and along with that whimsical decision, my mom and I decided to buy a house for me to sort of practice my skills. It was my practicum project, kind of like a capstone of this semester at Yes Tomorrow. So just before I begin, I want to know who here knows about the design method of permaculture, just so I can kind of see. Okay, somewhat, great. So I also just started using Prezi, so I'm still new to this, so if it's really confusing, I apologize. I'll try and not get people dizzy. So as I said, last February, my mom and I bought this house. It was a 1948 house built out of recycled materials from an old schoolhouse, which already was really neat because it was my schoolhouse. It's taught me all of this renovation practice, but also, you know, design and build and finances, budgeting, tools, that kind of thing. So it's a great metaphor, I guess, or symbol for this experience for me. And also that it was recycled. It was all recycled materials. You can see in the woodwork it's all old, rough-sawn rough-sawn boards are exactly 2 inches wide, 4 inches wide. So it's 3 bedrooms, 1.5 bath, 2 floors. Has this beautiful poured concrete foundation, which is pretty new for that time. And had old windows and doors and balsam wool insulation, which is basically balsam fir ground up. It's sawdust, and it's all settled. I had a cracked furnace, very old wiring, ungrounded, and I had an open well in my basement, and I had failed septic. So these are, I'm kind of highlighting the negatives in here, but all right, let's see, how do I go next? Okay, so permaculture. So this has been my drive for the past year. I learned about permaculture at Yes Tomorrow, and I like to describe it as a design system that looks at how we can increase ecological health in order to provide for human needs. So it recognizes that human needs are, we can fulfill our human needs based on nature's health. If that made sense. So there are 3 ethics in it: earth care, fair share, and people care. So economy, ecology, and anthropology, which is not really the term I would use. It's more like how to be philanthropic. So this sort of drove, you know, my decisions in everything in my house. How do I balance these 3 things? As Steve and Steve's permaculture partner Lauren say, this is the good. If you can get, you know, the economy part of it set, that's good. If you can get 2 things, that's better. If you can get all 3 to sort of balance out, that's the best design. So that was my goal. I did not achieve that everywhere, and you will see that's very, very true. So in permaculture, there are 12 principles, guiding principles, and I won't go through all of them because we'd be done in an hour, and then I have to keep you here for a while. So I'll just share a couple that really I think, applied to my design. So catch and store energy. When I see this, I automatically think of greenhouses, but for me it means solar panels. To some extent, I'll explain why solar panels I'm kind of iffy on still, but catch and store energy, produce no waste, stack functions. I call it stacking functions. The real principle is called integrate rather than segregate. Have multiple supporting elements, which is usually called use and value diversity. So for example, if you have, it's like having a toilet and also a composting toilet in case, or having a wood stove and an oil furnace, just in case oil prices go up, you have a wood stove, or in case all New Hampshire gets deforested, you have an,
Redundancy.
Redundancy, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, you should help me out here. So use the edges and value the marginal. So that for me is like the untapped resources, where are the hidden things that we don't often think about. And I'll explain that a bit more later. And then creatively use and respond to change, which I like to call a problem in pits. The problem is a solution. Just basically looking at something that's negative and immediately trying to look at how is this possibly positive. So what this is my guiding message. This is what I want you to go home with tonight. Make fewer but smarter changes to the systems, the envelope, and the finishes of your home for the greatest overall effect. And I've sort of clumped together those principles that I just showed you into these three things. Find the leverage points, problem to solution, stack functions, and have redundancy. And then use the natural and the marginal resources, so the untapped resources. So I'll keep coming back to this. So one thing that really helped me was doing a SWOT analysis. This is a business technique, a SWOT analysis. It's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So the strengths for me were the leverage points. That's how you address the weaknesses. It's a guiding thing in your design. So I had a nice sturdy frame. I had excellent solar aspect. I'm perfectly south. I think off by like 3 degrees maybe, so perfectly. I have a poured concrete foundation. It is a beautiful design. The proportions on the building are wonderful, so I didn't want to change that. I had financial backing from my parents, Papa, and I had my own time, energy. I didn't have another full-time job or anything. And again, I had my parental support, emotional support. Weaknesses, the internal weaknesses. These are usually things that come to mind right away. You know exactly what's wrong with the place. And so I had a cracked furnace, like I said. The insulation was horrible. It all settled down. It's in bats. It's like fiberglass, but sawdust. I had an asphalt roof and it was leaking. I had several rotting areas. The legal septic. The septic was a 500-gallon drum covered by railroad ties. You could see the black water inside. And it drained onto my neighbor's property, which is illegal. But not only that, it drained 10 feet from the river that fed Webster Lake in Franklin. So illegal. And yeah, we'll get back to that. So I also had old windows and doors from 1940s, I'm assuming. Ungrounded electrical wiring. I also had a 60-amp panel, which is really not that bad, but I ended up upgrading it. I had an inefficient electric water heater. I had cold winds from the north, lost all my heat. And then more of an aesthetic and sort of comfort thing, I had a really noisy Route 11 right next to me, and not very pretty. So then the external opportunities, I had the emotional and physical support network of my neighbors and my friends. Yes, tomorrow. I had those resources. I had rebates, state and federal, so financial opportunities are excellent. Access to education. YouTube is so awesome for renovating houses. They have so many great videos on there. Craigslist and FreeCycle, and then also our local and natural resources. Threats, sort of the external threats, these drove my design. thinking big picture, designing from patterns to details. That's another permaculture principle. But looking at what is the overarching context of the world that we live in, and how can I help to address that? So these things for me were climate change, economic crisis, ecological health, local disinterest. That was a big threat to me. I didn't want to do this project and suddenly feel so alone and isolated. I do sometimes, but I didn't want to feel like such an odd person out in a community. I wanted to sort of meet them in the middle. And then oil, gas, and electricity prices could also be a threat. So you may have seen this. This is our energy future graph, I guess, that it's depicting the ways that our society could go in terms of energy. I believe it to be true. So there's a techno fantasy, so that would be like iPhones and every gadgety thing is going to save us. Most likely not, in my opinion. Green tech stability, so that's solar panels and methane digesters and sort of the in-between. There's creative descent, which is permaculture for me. That's looking at those three things: ecology, economy, and people. Sort of finding a happy place. And then there's crashing, where we just lifeboat. So I considered my project sort of in the middle of green tech stability and creative descent, just because again I wanted to meet people in the middle. I realized that we're in a very tech world right now, and how do you get people to immediately buy into creative descent? You can't just like create this utopia and expect everyone to join along. You just kind of have to ease people into it. So I was looking to sort of mediate that, but also I wasn't sure what I was going to do with this house at the time when I was renovating it. Thought maybe I'll resell it. My mom's a real estate agent, so she was like, I was like, oh, Mom, I'm going to put in a methane digester. And she was like, whoa, nobody's going to want that. Same with composting toilets. I really wanted composting toilets at first, but yeah, I'll get there. So I tried to map out my design process, and this just shows you my brain. A lot of these decisions that you see up here, and I'll go through this whole thing, are kind of whimsical. I don't know how I ended up on them. Oftentimes I'd be thinking like, oh, what should I do for insulation? And some random person would come into my life who would mention something about a certain product, and I'd immediately be like, oh, that's a solution. So this is the best rendition that I could come up with for how I got through this house project. But stop me at any time if you guys are confused as to what's going on. So I bought this in February of last year, and immediately started gutting it, but I'll try and avoid the smaller kind of obvious things. So I had an asphalt roof. It was leaking. There were rots, so I put on a metal roof. I had outdated electrical, like I said, so I upgraded to 200 amp panel. Those two things together provided the perfect opportunity for solar panels, that plus being solar south. So I went with solar panels. The leverage point here, I have rebates. There's state, federal, and the New Hampshire Electric Co-op rebates. So that was a great decision for me. It took me a long time to make that decision because of the embodied energy of panels. So where they're mined, how they get here, and then what happens in 20, 25 years when they're no longer working. Some say that they last longer, but so I ended up really pushing the company that I went with to get American-made solar panels and American mined as well. So I don't know to what degree the materials were mined in America, but they promised me that the majority of them were. So then going back to the outdated electrical, because I decided to redo the electric, we had to gut the place. Might as well gut it, and that's when I realized, oh my gosh, I have sawdust for insulation. That's this picture here. So I removed all my windows too as part of the envelope thing. I removed my windows, which I'll eventually turn into a glass house. That's not mine. I wish it was one day. But I also, oops, I'm going backwards, sorry. So I took this sawdust, which balsam fir is really acidic, and I took the sheetrock from the exterior walls, which is really basic, it's gypsum, and I threw them in my garden, and I hope they just balance each other out. If they don't, well, oh well. Something got put in my garden. So that's sort of a produce no waste problems solution. I had all this stuff. I don't want to throw it out. I'd have to go and pay money in the construction dumpster to chuck all this stuff. And I'm also stacking functions. My lawn, it was just a lawn. Yeah, that's all I need to say. It was just a lawn. There was nothing there. It was completely dead in terms of vegetation. So then I had to decide, what do I re-insulate with? So I've only put 4 options up here, but there are many options. You can insulate with mycelium now, mushroom panels. It's really neat technology. It's not a great R value yet. I don't think they've really figured out all the tech behind it, but it's also really expensive. Really healthy though. You get, I wonder if it starts, I don't know, deteriorating your walls. Probably not. I think it's dehydrated mushrooms. But so fiberglass was an option. I didn't really want to go with fiberglass. It was never intended to be an insulation material. It was a filtration material, and it's not a good air barrier, and it's not a good R value. I had 4-inch studs, so putting fiberglass in there was just like asking the heat to just leave my house. And it's also not recyclable, so that was a consideration for me. There's cellulose, which wouldn't have been a good enough R value in my 4-inch wall cavity. And the dense pack cellulose, which is a different type of insulation, would rot my walls out. That seemed to be a problem. It's the size of my walls would rot. Yep.
Why do you think it would rot your walls out?
So, it's a great question. Because it's only a 4-inch cavity, the dew point occurs right at the wood.
Okay.
If it was a bigger cavity, the dew point would happen somewhere in between, I think. I'm not positive about that. That's what I understand. So a lot of these options they're new types of insulation. They're made for new construction. New construction usually has bigger wall cavities.
Okay.
But I have this old 2x4 stud, 2x4 frame, and I couldn't.
Cool.
I couldn't put that in. So. Same thing with the open cell spray foam. So spray foam is generally an oil-based product, but they had this water-based open cell spray foam, it basically allows vapor to pass through. But the problem again was that the dew point would happen right at my wall and rot out my frame or my sheathing. So then I came to closed cell oil-based spray foam. So I talk a lot about high embodied energy, so the life cycle of the product. I thought about this a lot. I was like, I don't want to get solar panels because of all this. The same thing with spray foam. I was stuck on what I'm going to do for insulation for a long, long time. This seemed like the best option, but at the same time, it's oil-based. What do you do when your house gets, it's no longer in use? It just goes to a landfill, and then it's oil. So it's also really expensive. So I'm going to back up for a second and go to my systems. So this is sort of a timeline. This is actually the order of things, or order that I did things in. So I got to the installation and was like, I don't know, I need to wait. So I slowed down, backed up, and tried to address my system. So I had a cracked furnace, and I had an old water heater. So we ripped out the water heater. Oh wait. I'll just go with it. I'm not sure why this one's next. It made sense in my mind when I made it. So, I'm not sure.
Did you get a great rebate on a new water heater that's energy efficient?
Yes, I think I did.
That must be.
Well, because I got solar panels. Oh yeah, this is why. So because I got solar panels, I decided that, and because I had a cracked furnace, I had to think about what's my new heating system going to be. I thought, I'm not going to use my electricity for heating, if the heat's just going to be going right out the walls. So I want a really tight house. Spray foam makes a really tight house. So in order to maximize my solar panel energy with my electric heat, I decided that I'll go fossil fuel free with my heating and go fossil full with my insulation. It's a bit of a bit of hypocrisy there. But it ended up being, I think, a really good decision. I figured that my house would be where it is for a really long time, so having spray foam might not be such a bad option. It'll be hopefully countering the cost of the energy used to heat the house, and of the outputs of oil. I won't be using oil, so I think it's a fair trade. I've yet to convince myself of that. But so going back to the crack furnace and inefficient water heater, I decided to get a mini split heat pump. So it runs on electricity, and a heat pump is basically the opposite of a refrigerator. It pulls warm moisture from the air, even freezing winter air, and pumps it back into the house. It condenses, the water stays outside, and if you stand behind the unit outside, it's like getting blasted with an air conditioner. It's so cold. And then it pumps warm air inside. So there are rebates for that, which is great. And then my insurance company's happy that I have a heating system, because before I was like, oh, I'll just go with a rocket mass heater or a wood stove. And there are realities that I had to face. And the other thinking about that, the spray foam would retain enough heat that if I went away for a while, it'd probably stay warm enough in there. And I also replumbed my house with PEX tubing, which is like plastic tubing instead of copper, and they expand quite a bit. So leaving, which I tend to do during the winter, for a while isn't too much of an issue. Hopefully, we will find out this winter. So then I got a hybrid electric heat pump water heater. So this is again a heat pump, and works the same way. It pulls warm moisture from the air, but it can also run electricity. So if there is no warm moisture in the air for whatever reason, it reverts to electric. So it's a very, very efficient one. There are cooperative rebates, electricity company rebates. I think PSNH has one as well. I paid $1,000 for this thing and installed it myself, and I wrote out receipts for my own work, and NHEC paid me $650 for this. So I ended up only paying $350 for this highly efficient water heater. It's amazing. I think I gave the guy a hug, actually. So the other great thing, so because it pulls out the warm moisture, it dehumidifies my basement, which is great. I have a really wet basement right now because I have an open well, like I said earlier. So one of the first things we did when we got the house, we tried to pour concrete down this ground pressure well. So we sump pumped it all out, poured down concrete, and of course, like an hour later, it was filled back up. And then I thought, well, why are we even trying to fill it in? If the electricity goes out, I have a fresh water source right here. It's not always fresh. There've been dead mice in there, but you could boil it, and yeah, it'd be okay. But it does put moisture into my basement. So the water heater, this heat pump, really helps in dehumidifying that. I'll probably put a vapor barrier over it, some sort of like membrane to really keep the moisture in there. So where the furnace was, I decided to put a wood stove. Now, one of the considerations with the spray foam is that because it's so tight, I don't have much oxygen in there in my house. I need some sort of fresh air exchanger, but fresh air exchangers are really expensive. They last about 20 years, and then they break, and they use electricity. And then if you get a fresh air exchanger with a heat unit on it, so you're getting fresh warm air in, it's even more expensive. But I didn't want to do that. I really wanted a wood stove, but wood stoves need oxygen, so I don't want to feed my wood stove the oxygen that we would be breathing in the house. And so to address that, I might have this later, but to address that, we're doing, some of you may have seen these, they're kind of like raised beds, or like cold frames with soda cans made into tubing painted black, and they lean up against the southern windows, so the sun hits these cans, heats up the air, it draws fresh air in from the bottom, and then pipes it into the house. So I'll be getting warm, passively heated, fresh air. And then I can have wood stove. Excellent. So I put this wood stove, I put one wood stove on my first floor, and one wood stove where my old furnace was, goes through the same thimble into the chimney, and then it's right under the ductwork.
Can you explain the can theory a little better?
Sure, yeah.
Is that pipe directly from the
I was
outside?
gonna take a picture, and I didn't. So it's basically a box with glass.
You can draw
over
it on the board.
and then, yeah, okay.
Yeah, why not?
So here's your window.
Yeah.
This is south. You basically have a box, and in it, so the fresh air would come in this
That's
way.
on the outside of the house.
Yeah, it's on the outside
Excellent.
of the house, yep. These are my clapboards. So this is all glass, and then you've got soda cans that are, they glued together?
They're glued, yeah.
They're glued together. And they've got holes drilled, 3 holes drilled in them between each one so that it spirals the air through it and
wow.
slows it down. So you're not just, it's not coming in
Okay.
quickly. It
Yeah,
has
I do.
time to really heat up. And they're all painted black. So hopefully that works. Yeah.
What is that called?
I don't know. I've seen them called different things. I never know how to describe it.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Genius?
It's genius. It is. And we watched a video actually of a guy who was doing it on his house in Canada, and he didn't even have his at an angle to the sun. He had it flat against his door, and it was like 103 degrees in there. Amazing. And I've seen ones that were round on top, so you really get full sun, round glass, or like plexiglass, so you get the full sun exposure, and they were really neat. I can't wait to build one. Yeah. So the second wood stove, going back, the second wood stove is going to be under the old ductwork. I was going to rip out the ductwork, and then I thought, why not just use what's there? This goes back to the leverage, use what's there. The problem's the solution. I have all this ductwork, what can I do with it? I'm not going to just throw it out. So that will distribute heat throughout my whole house. So the other great thing is that the hybrid electric heat pump water heater and the wood stove are right near each other. So in the winter, the wood stove will be providing heat for the moisture in the air, which then my hot water heater will take. So it's like a direct exchange of energy. So my water heater will hopefully not ever go into electric mode in the winter if my wood stove is running, which saves me a lot of electricity and money. You can kind of see it there. So this is the ductwork, and then my wood stove, which I'm getting for free, hopefully, from a friend, would be right here. And then that's my water heater. So this is the heat pump here, and then my well is just over there. So the vapor will. Yeah, go ahead.
How so you have a fan system that you're gonna set up for your ductwork? What's gonna drive the air? You need an electric fan or
I
something?
think just heat rising. I guess, yeah, I could put a
think
fan
you're
in
gonna
there.
want
Probably
At
should.
least something.
My basement floor isn't insulated, or my first floor isn't insulated, so I'm just hoping it'll just rise through. When I have a soapstone wood stove upstairs, and I had my drywallers there the other day, and they ran it for a couple hours, and after maybe 3 or 4 hours, the whole house was like 80 degrees. I was down into a t-shirt in my house, and that was just with the one wood stove on the first floor. So I don't know how much wood I'll really be burning. It might be so tight that I don't need much. So maybe just heating up my basement to keep it dry in there. And I don't know. This is all an experiment. You'll have to come and visit. Yeah. Any other questions before I move on? I'm going to explain this. Needs oxygen. Can heaters. So then one of the results of having spray foam is I needed to cover it legally. It's it's highly flammable, or it just smolders, and then I had to cover it with sheetrock. Sheetrock is a fire retardant, so I was looking into natural plasters and covering it all with pallet boards, and I was getting all excited about these funky ideas, or just painting right onto the spray foam, and then I found out that I couldn't do that at all.
Why not natural blasters?
I guess because they're not recognized as a fire retardant.
They're the
And
same
Do they act as such?
material as the gypsum, basically.
I don't know.
They're
Maybe,
plaster.
maybe that wasn't the reason. Maybe I just didn't want to do so much work. I don't know. That's what a lot of these decisions, I don't know why I made them, but they ended up working. There was a reason we couldn't do plaster.
Makes
I think it
sense.
was more of my time, energy. I didn't want to waste a lot of my own time.
It's an artwork.
Extremely labor
It's
work of
intensive.
art
It
to
is,
do that.
and if you hire somebody to do plaster, it's like 3 times. Yeah, if you want to come and do it, you're welcome to come and do it. So I went with sheetrock, which I'm not too upset about. It kind of helps with that, finding the middle ground between my neighbors and me, and trying to show them that you can have like an eco-friendly home and more simple home and still have it look like traditional homes. So, and it fit with the rest of the house. I had sheetrock on the interior walls. I never ripped out the interior walls. So, but one thing I did do. Oh yeah, I don't know if you can see this. Oh, there you go. So one thing I did try and do, and I'm still trying to do, is come up with clay paint. So the spray foam, in terms of the people care, it's got a lot of VOCs, volatile organic compounds, which are not healthy for us, and they also say that spray foam off gases. So over a period of years, I don't know what it is, probably a long time, it off gases and you get these chemicals in your body that you can't smell, you can't detect them. So, and the other thing that spray foam does is it makes your house kind of like a petri dish. A lot of the moisture stays in the house. That's the other good thing for having a heat pump in the basement and lots of wood stoves. It'll dry it out. But to address the moisture, clay paint really helps with that. It's got clay and chalk and flour glue in it as a binder, and it takes in the moisture, regulates humidity in your house. Another one that I'll probably use in the bathrooms is lime paint, which is what they used to use. It's also called whitewash. They used to use it to paint their houses. And that's just lime, chalk, and flour glue. It's pretty easy. So these are my testers. They're still a little chalky. I've got to figure out what to put in them. I've got linseed oil that I've been trying. It seems to work all right. It's just a healthier alternative. The EPA says that house paints are one of the top 5 most hazardous materials to have in your house. And that's not just when they're wet, that's long term. They say that touching paints and, not good for you. So what else? So, other things. So using untapped resources, this is my here. This is where I am right now. This picture was taken a couple days ago, and that one too. I had this horrible floor in my kitchen. It was all linoleum, because back in the 50s it was considered ugly to or not ugly, it's considered poor to have wood flooring. So they would cover it with linoleum, and in the kitchen they actually tarred it down, so it's so stuck, and I tried to rip it up, it just wouldn't work. So instead I got grain bags from my neighbor who's a cattle farmer, and started paper macheing my floor. So I've got maybe 5 layers now of these grain bags. They're basically just crumpled up Elmer's glue, water, put down, and then I'll polyurethane it. Done. See if it works. And then beadboard. My dad and I went to the dump looking for pallets to do sort of a collage of beadboard. And in the burn pile there were 12 beautiful old, are they pine? I think they're pine. Pine beadboard. It was unbelievable. And like 2 days later I saw them burning all that, so we went at the right time. It was perfect. And now it's all primed and it's beautiful. It's great. Love the dump. I usually go to the dump with like a little bag and come back with a car full of stuff. It's terrible. It's also great. So yeah, untapped resources. Also for my tiling, didn't put this in, but I went to a tiling store in our town and told them I was doing a mosaic project, my bathroom, and and asked them if they had any samples or like broken boxes. A trick I learned from a friend a while ago. You just go in and say, "Do you have any like damaged boxes?" And they often do. And these people were at this tile place said, "We get people that come in here all the time. You know, vendors that say." That's discontinued, throw it out. And they always throw them out. And so now I get a call every week or so saying, we've got more tiles for you, and they're beautiful. And not only that, they come with these awesome boards I'll use for signs for my farm. So I love trash. I'm a trash fiend. And I also went to a local hardware store. It was like a design center and asked them if they had any samples. I got probably $100, maybe more than that, $200 worth of granite tiles. Beautiful, all different colors of granite slate. Untapped resources. Oh yeah, so this is another thing. This sort of relates to how my property relates to my house. So like I said, I had this illegal septic. It was just so bad. And I wish I'd asked Steve about this earlier, but earlier in the year, I got a new septic, $9,000 put in, and then Steve told me that you don't legally have to have a septic in New Hampshire, you just have to have the plan approved by the state. But at the time I thought maybe I'll resell this house, so I put in this fancy septic. But part of the plan when they installed it was that they had to dig out the old septic and remove the tank and the pipe and everything, and then fill it back in with sand. And when they came in and they dug it out, I said, wait, don't fill it back in with sand. This is perfect. I've got this pipe, my old septic pipe, underground, already buried, leading to this now hole. I'll just replumb it to be gray water. So I've got my laundry sink, my kitchen sink, my bathroom sink, all going into this pond. It's perfect. I hope it works. Don't tell anyone it's not legal yet. I don't know when it will be. So yeah, going back, so find the leverage points, problems and solutions. So like the septic, I had this septic tank. I could have just, filled it in. It's a great pond now. It's got bamboo around it. We've got some horsetail, some irises, beautiful things. Stack functions and have multiple elements that perform similar functions. So I've got three types of heaters: the cans, mini split, the wood stoves, and then stacking functions. The water heater in the basement dehumidifies. It heats my water. It's near the wood stove, so I get passive heat. Yep.
On the topic of heat, have you ever thought about utilizing your wood stove to also heat your water?
Yes. Yep. The only problem with that in this house would be getting so much moisture in my house. I don't know what this type of insulation is going to do for me in the winter, but it very well might be too humid in there, especially in the summer. Summer's can be a big problem for humidity. But at my parents' house, where we have, I think it's just fiber, loose pack cellulose? It's just loose newspaper, pretty much. We have to be running water on the wood stove all the time to keep moisture in there. So I don't know what it's going to do in the winter. It'll be an interesting experiment. And then use natural and marginal resources. So that's, for me, that was going to the tile store, going to the hardware store, going to the dump. Always find great stuff to dump. And I think that's it. I think that's nice. I highly recommend Prezi. It's pretty neat thing. Any questions? Yeah.
Can you speak on the grounds?
Mm-hmm.
What do you have going on?
I was going through my design, but I don't have it. So, how do I explain this? So I have a northern and sort of eastern slope away from my house. My house is on the top of the hill. And most of the problems with that are cold winds from the northwest and drying winds from the south. Lots of sun, but also lots of loss and everything. So I lose moisture really quickly. So what I did is I designed a bunch of swales and berms that Swales are, sorry, for those of you who don't speak permaculture jargon, swales are ditches and then a berm that's usually on contour. It is on contour so that you can slow the water, spread the water, and sink the water into the ground rather than water just shooting off the landscape. So you're not sinking in. With my land though, I really wanted to store, I was focusing on storing the water. I've got a river at the bottom of my hill and I wanted to keep it high up on the hill, so rather than having swales, I had water moving ditches or trenches. So I have maybe 5 of these systems, and they all go into ponds, and when the ponds overflow, they go into a bigger pond. So I actually have 4 ponds. I have my gray water pond, I've got 2 smaller ponds, and when they overflow, they go into the big pond. And that way I have water on point, and I can, and it also passively irrigates my landscape by just moving the water along the swales.
Mhm.
Everything's planted on the berm itself. So.
Yeah.
What else can I tell you about?
How much acreage?
7/10 of an acre.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah,
small.
it's pretty small,
Yeah.
but pretty intensive. I mean, I've probably only planted, I don't even know how much, 500 square feet of it in total. And I'm already running out of places to put things. I feel like I'm gonna start expanding. The majority of the northern side I'm going to dedicate to a wind barriers to also try and help with the cold winds and heat loss in the winter. And it'll stack functions as a wildlife corridor to move wildlife through my property and onto another preserve. I have a picture of a sun trap somewhere in here. But part of my design of my landscape is creating this U shape around my house of evergreens. Acts as a sun trap in the winter and also a wind barrier, a wind break. So we'll see if that works.
Yeah. One thing, you talked about how you removed the old windows on the property. But could you maybe talk a little bit about the decision-making process you went behind
Yep.
for the new windows that you put in?
I have to forget about that part. I'm glad to forget about it. That was just as sort of frustrating as the insulation, just because I had these old windows, why get rid of them? New windows aren't honestly all that much better. They are, but at the time I was like, oh, but they still let out a lot of air. Their R value, which is the resistance value, it's a measurement for the transfer of heat and cold, is like 3 versus my spray foam wall, which is 28. So if you have 28 R value wall, which is pretty good for 4 inches, and then you have this window that only is a 3, it's kind of like a vacuum for cold. You're just letting cold air in and hot air out. But at the same time, you can't live in a black box with no windows. So these are better than the old windows. If I'd been throwing out my old windows, I maybe wouldn't have done it. But I'll use my old windows for cold frames, glass houses, that kind of thing, projects. Yeah.
Did you go with like double pane?
Yep, they're double pane and they're low E. So in the north, low E, the coating is on the coating that goes between the 2 panes of glass. I think it's on the back side of the.
Outside.
Is it on the outside pane?
So the inside of the outside.
It's
pane.
on the
Inside of the
Yeah.
outside
Inside
pane.
of the outside
on
pane.
the outside of the 2
What just science? What it means really is that the sun in the summer will be deflected and the sun in the winter will be let in. Something about the angle or yeah. And in the south it's reversed, where the glazing is. So windows are really expensive. That was another consideration, but they look really nice. Another problem too with old windows, you have the window weights and you have the window weight cavities. So if I had spray foam everywhere and then I had these old windows and then next to them I had these little narrow they're just cavities with this weight that pulls the window up and down. that would just be a sieve for my, I mean, it would just be vacuuming all my effort out the walls, out the windows, literally.
How did you handle the insulation of your roof or attic?
So I have dense pack, no, blown-in cellulose in the attic. It's basically newspaper and borate or something. They go in with a hose. They ripped out all my old insulation, which was again sawdust and some fiberglass. Excuse me. And they brought this big hose up, sprayed a bunch of newspaper in it, closed it up. They sealed my light fixtures with spray foam, all access to the attic, and then spray foamed along. I've got a dormer, and so I've got the flat roof, and then my door, not on my dormer, on the other side, on the pitch of my roof where it meets. That's a weak point. Every time two different areas meet on a house, it's a weak point, structurally and in
So
terms
this
of
is
heat
the case,
loss.
so you kind of have a
Yeah, it's
partial
a
attic space here.
Yeah. So we put in I think a good amount of spray foam along that meeting point, that junction. And then between the first and second floors, it's a balloon framed house, so you can reach your arm from the first floor to the second floor through the wall when there's no insulation or sheetrock. But in some areas you couldn't do that for some reason. So they had to go on the outside, remove clapboards, drill a hole, and then blow in cellulose in there to try and make sure there wasn't like just a gap. When there's a gap in a house, if a house is really well insulated and there's a gap, that acts as a vacuum for hot air, cold air exchange. Yeah.
So, you've talked about the house, you've talked about integrating it with the property, and one of the things you mentioned was, how do you make it so you're not alone in the town of Andover? So could you talk a little bit about kind of your role stepping up as, a community official now, and how it's being, how people are perceiving your work on the farm? Make a long drink of water.
So I got elected to be on the board of selectmen in my town last month, March. Feels like forever ago. So I'm looking into the policy part of town, but it's actually put me in the spotlight, I guess, in my town, which has been a really neat experience because I get to talk about these things. People are really excited for me, and I get to talk about my house finally. And a lot of people, I live right on the road. One of the things that was one of the weaknesses originally was that I was right on the road side. And it's a little bit of a downhill, so these 18-wheelers go down, they start braking, it's like, but other than that, it's been a great resource. People see my house, it's passive PR. I don't have to advertise, people know it's me. I'm out there on my tractor, digging, whatever. They stop and they ask me questions, they ask about the solar panels. So I've sort of been approaching the community with sort of a come and see it. I don't really try and push it on anybody. I definitely do, but I'm not so evangelical as I could be. Yeah, I think they are receiving it pretty well. I think because I'm young, they get really excited because they can see that I'm passionate for it. They can see that it's different and kind of progressive, and that's exciting to them. But I think they also see that they can do it themselves, and that's a really important bit of it. A lot of people are like, oh, I could get solar panels. If you could get them, I could get them. So yeah, I think being right on the road has been such a blessing. And then now being a local official, I can push projects in town, municipal projects, to be a little bit more in line with my thinking. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay. Anything else? Has anybody here ever renovated a home? It's fun business. It gets easier. I'm realizing now.
So sorry. It's okay.
Oh,
That's you?
it's not filming anymore. Sorry.
Smash the whole screen.
It's all right. Yeah. No, but
You didn't bust up the computer too bad, did you, Eric?
we. I don't know if we got the whole. We got 59 minutes of it.
Yeah.